good evening, everybody. And it is time. Mark Gassard, Mark's Message, Peachtree Corners, the peachiest place on the planet. And one of our very own native sons here from Metro Atlanta coming back to Peachtree Corners. And when he lived in the Atlanta area, Peachtree Corners wasn't even a microcosm, it was nothing out there. So, with that, we have the very distinguished Ben Gay III. And before I bring him on, I think there's a few things you need to be aware of. At age 25, just real quickly, Ben was president of what was then the world's largest direct sales network marketing company. And this guy's hung around legends like J. Douglas Edwards. Go check these people out. Dr. Napoleon Hill. And I'm going to say it, hope you don't mind, Ben. Earl the Pearl Nightingale. I mean, William Penn Patrick, Zig Ziglar, and I could go on and on and on. And Ben loves to tell a story. He's truly a Southern gentleman. And, we're even going to get into just a tad of he's dealt with people like Charles Manson, the Apollo astronauts. I mean, it goes on and on. The guy truly is a living legend in sales. And the thing is, we all can learn a lot from Ben, and I'm really looking forward. So without further ado, I'm going to bring the man on himself, Ben Gay III. Ben, how are we doing?
We are doing fine. I hope you are, and I'm sure you are. So it's an honor to be with you again, Mark.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you allowing us the privilege and honor of you coming back to Peachtree Corners, Georgia. And I know it's two words now, East and Lake. Why don't you tell people, and the reason I mentioned the pride of East Lake, the country club, talk to us about one thing that's always intrigued me, the tutelage and knowledge that was in that clubhouse. You mentioned the last time your father allowed you to come in and sit down and learn from these giants of whether it was Coke, IBM, whatever the company was. Could you talk to us about that when you were a young person?
Yeah, we lived about 2 blocks out the front gate of East Lake Country Club. So I spent a lot of time there with and without my father. But when I was with him, either playing or pretending like I was caddying, that he had his regular caddy, so I was allowed to walk along with the caddy. And at the end of the round, we would go to the men's grill in the main clubhouse. And my only instruction, the only rule was, don't say anything unless ask a question, answer it yes or no if possible, and if not, in the shortest number of words possible. Wow. and learn and listen. Because this was from the time I was 12, 13, 14, something like that, on up until I left Atlanta. And as I got older and a little more successful, I was allowed to talk, but I still didn't say much. I was so used to sitting there in silence. They must have thought I was something wrong with me. I was a mute or something. But the founders of Home Depot, whoever was the chairman of the board of Coca-Cola, automatically got a membership at the club. All the top vice presidents at Coke, and as you said, like people like Xerox. If your home office wasn't in Atlanta, as you know, at least a regional office was, right, if you were a company of any size. And with many of those memberships, the regional VP would be a member and so on. Plus a lot of old money, the Candler money from Coca-Cola and so on, was around the club because the club was formed in the late 1800s. So I got to just sit there and soak it up. And you and I have talked about this. It's not like they were going, and now, Ben, if you're in front of a prospect, you say this, and I say, it was just sopping up how successful people conducted themselves and what they talked about and how gentlemanly they were. There might be anywhere from 5 to 15 Southern gentlemen gathered around. Of course, we're in the men's locker room, so there were no women in there. I met the women through my mother, who was over in the ladies' locker room, and the thing that I really learned was not so much technique or whatever. It was what I just said about the class and quality of those folks. It was Jim Newman, an old friend of mine, now deceased, created the term comfort zone. He
Gotcha.
hadn't created it yet when I was there, but looking back, what they were doing was setting my comfort zone. So I would come out of those sessions thinking that that's how people lived. Their parking lot was filled with Mercedes and Jaguars and Cadillacs and Lincolns and so on. And they were sitting there, many of them with their expensive cigars, puffing it away, sipping on a glass of bourbon. And I just thought that's the way everybody lived. You were supposed to live that way. So
Right.
my comfort zone was being set high. When I then bid my family adieu and went off to get married, I was still working for my father, but he said, when you leave, you leave. It's not you and your wife get to move into the house. So I wound up in a 2-bedroom apartment on the corner of Ponce de Leon Avenue and Peachtree Street, catty-cornered across from the Fox Theater. It looked like we were rich because that old building, the Ponce, was built for the Candler widows. There was a time, it was 11 floors, and there was a time when every widow had a floor. Then they
Wow.
got cut in half, blah, blah, blah. By the time I got there, we got 2 rooms separated by a bathroom, and washed our dishes in the bathtub and cooked on a hot plate. So I hadn't been there 30 minutes when I looked around and thought, what is this? And I repeat, the term comfort zone hadn't yet been created, but in my mind, I was thinking, this isn't me. This isn't how I'm supposed to live. And so September 15th, 1965, on a Wednesday, I answered a want ad and became a distributor in Holiday Magic Cosmetics, along with my partner, Jimmy Rucker, and Zig Ziglar, all in the same meeting on the same day. And off we went. It was a little slow getting started for me, but within a few months after I figured out they were really serious about learning the scripts, I learned the scripts and started making a good deal of money. Adjusted for inflation, Jimmy Rucker and I, still working for my father, part-time, were making $400,000 to $500,000 a month, adjusted for inflation,
Wow.
to today. So, and then when the money started coming, I handled mine better than most people did because I was raised around money. It wasn't new to me. It wasn't tear it up, throw it in the air, and and start yelling and screaming. One time, right after I moved to California, we were in training, and they said, well, pack up your stuff. We're going to go to the city. I said, where are we going? They said, we're going to go in and everybody's going to get a diamond pinky ring and alligator shoes. That's what new money does,
Yes.
And I said, well, I'll just stay here and study the scripts. No, you got to go. And I said, I'm not going to drive over to San Francisco and get a pinky ring. Do you know who wears those? It's not successful. I never saw a diamond pinky ring at East Lake. I promise you that.
Right.
And I said, if I get alligator shoes, they're going to have golf cleats on the bottom, not to wear around so that almost ended my career because it became quite an issue. I said, I'm not going. I'm just not going.
Wow.
Read my lips. No. But that was comfort zone set properly versus here comes a bunch of money and you've never had any before or never been around any before. So that was a huge help to me. The crowd at East Lake probably over the years saved me millions of dollars in bad mistakes that from 23 to 23 is when I started making some serious money up to I became president of the company a couple of years later. Had that money just come rushing at me, I tell you, it just dawned on me, Mark, what it would have been. It would be like a pig farmer. No offense to pig farmers. That came to my mind because one of my best friends is a pig farmer. but it'd be like a pig farmer winning that last lottery they had a few weeks ago of almost $1 billion with a B, $1 billion, and just throwing it on him.
Right.
It would ruin his life.
Right.
As it has many people. So I got the seminar, and I've always said if you win the lottery or you get a $8 million or whatever per year football contract, before you get your first check, you should be required to go to a seminar put on by Charles Schwab or American Express or somebody that shows you here's what you do when a lot of money starts coming in over the top of the door. Well, I had my seminar before I made a penny at East Lake and at my father's feet.
That's incredible. Ben, I just got to interrupt you. There's a bunch of people saying hi, and I'm going to pop it up here again. We got
Sure.
Robert Brooker,
Hey, Rob.
and
My main
Emilio.
man.
Yeah,
One of my biggest supporters and vice versa.
right. And I have to share these to you. Ron Goodwin. I
Hey,
mean,
Ron.
there's a bunch of people here. Randy Chafee.
Randy, I know. Yep.
Yeah, outstanding. And then there he's saying hi to me, and then you got Robert coming back. They're all saying hi to one another. This is what's wild about this group. And then you got Miss Sandy
Sandy?
there. She's saying hello.
A rose between a whole bunch of thorns.
And then, yeah,
Hey, Tom.
absolutely. Sandy, thank you for making us all look better. It's nice having you on with us. Tom Ginn, I know you know Tom.
Yep.
And, Robert's saying hi to everybody again. And then we got, let's see, Scott Rickard
Hello,
saying
Scott.
hi. He's out here. So there's a bunch of people. I just wanted to bring this into the play. The other thing I want to ask you, Ben, we've known what you've done and who you know, but one thing you shared with me, can you tell us, you went through closers 1, 2, 3, is there a 4, 5, and 6 in the making? What's going on with that right now? Because I know you got some things happening.
And an 18, 19, and 20. I've decided to do what our buddies over at Chicken Soup for the fill in the blank soul did.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole lot. The closers 1 and 2 especially cover just about all aspects of selling, but there's unique things in every industry. And so I decided to finally follow their lead and have the closers for home improvement, the closers for whatever industry. So in fact, a thing just went out today telling people if they were interested to let me know, and no obligation, I'd send them a letter and it explains the whole thing. And the people here, if they didn't get that thing today via Constant Contact, just go to my email address, BFG3, it'll be crawling across the bottom in a minute, BFG3 at directcon.net, BFG3 at directcon.net, and put, all you have to say is co-author program. But if you want to write something else, I'd love to hear from you. But if you just put co-author in the subject line, I will send you all the details about how the program works. But basically, we're going to have the closers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are being written, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, until we run out of valuable subjects to share. But based on the people circling the field, wanting to get in, there are more categories than I ever imagined. If you said to me,
Right.
Name the categories you want, I probably could have come up with 4 or 5.
Right.
Just off the top of my head. Well,
Right.
I'm guessing there are almost 100 I've seen so far.
Right.
So if that's of interest, jump in.
I put up your contact info now, just so people know how to get in touch with you on your website, your email. There it is. And also, so you get the discount, everybody, I'm going to interject something. You have to use this website. Don't use the website on Ben's, that on his website for books. And I'll let Ben tell the story, but Gigi has, she has the corner of that particular market. Ben, why do we have to go to storesebay.com, Ranzoni Books? What's up with that?
Well, what's up with that is I married a thief. BFG3.com is my website, and we sell books and all, but we sell them at regular retail. Ranzoni Books offers the books, all of them, including some cousins of the closers, at special pricing with free shipping. And people are always asking me, how is that possible? I said, well, Ranzoni was Gigi's maiden name. There's a little tip. And Gigi goes into the warehouse and steals the books that she wants And then I sign them because it's not clear to me what I'm signing. It's just every day I sign a few hundred books, and I sign the books, and then she puts them in packaging with my postage on them, and out the door they go in our mail stream. So the reason she's able to offer special pricing and free shipping is she doesn't pay anything. And
Gotcha.
so I've had a running battle with the staff in the warehouse for years of stop her. And they said, no, you stop her. We're we're not saying to Mrs. Gay, put down those books. And so, and and neither am I, Mark. So I guess she wins.
Well, look at this. So you got people saying hi to one another. Nancy's like laughing about that one. So there you go. You know,
Hi,
she can
Sandy.
like that. And she probably understands that, hey, she's trying to help you out and make a dollar. You know, what do you think? But somehow you're not seeing it that way, are you, Ben?
Well, it's cute. I just knew she was such a pretty, beautiful, soft lady, sweet. Everybody who's met Gigi says that's the nicest person I've ever met. I didn't know you could be nice and a kleptomaniac.
Wow. That's incredible. Hey, and one thing I want to do here, and I'll get back. Tom Ginn wanted me to make this announcement here. It's Elevate Your Profits. It's going to launch on Monday. This is something he and I
All
are going
right.
to do. And you, my friend, will probably come back because if anybody knows about money, you do. The pros and the cons, if there are any cons. I never knew there were cons to money, but there's con men out there, but I didn't know
Yeah.
about. I always thought money was a tool. But anyway, on Monday, President's Day, the 15th, Elevate Your Profits. Tom and I are going to be launching that. So that's just something, that's a plug, and I'll get off my soapbox. And Robert wanted to say much the way the Billy Merritt sees Deneja as something that would serve customers of almost any industry. So he was talking about what you
Mhm.
were. And then he says the best shipping rates in the country. You know, because correct me if I'm wrong, it is free, right, Ben? You don't pay.
Free,
Yeah. So
free,
I
free
don't
to the
want to ask what
customer,
you charge. I don't want to ask what you charge, but
free to the
Ronzoni Books
customer.
is free.
Yeah, free to the customer, free to Gigi. The only one paying in this deal is me.
Oh my goodness, Ben.
Uh,
And it says
pick-
here, some women love diamonds, other loves free shipping. I mean, my God, that is a trick. We need to have Gigi on here to defend herself.
no,
And Larry wants to say hello to us. Thank you, Larry, for joining us.
Larry.
I appreciate everybody for joining us here this evening, and feel free to share this out and any questions you want to delve into. And as we were talking backstage, Ben, you know, all these people you've known, so it's given you like a foundation. You've learned from your father and his, you know, business friends,
Mhm.
associates, and then all of a sudden you come into play. I said this the last time. I called it the traveling performing group, like a sales ensemble, and you have
Mhm.
guys like, you know, J. Douglas Edwards, Frank Herman, Earl Nightingale, Zig Ziglar, Napoleon Hill, Merle Frazier, Bill Dempsey. You know, here's a guy I've seen way back in the day, Cavett Robert. I mean, that's a legend. I mean, you had access to these people. Did all this? Were you thinking about anything at the time? Like, wow, I'm here in high cotton with all these type of people. Did that register up here at the time when you were that young?
Probably not as much as it should have. Zig was 18 years older than I was, Bill Patrick, and oddly enough, a lot of the others were 12 years older. I sort of plot their ages by mine plus 12. Uh, so I knew I was in certainly with some superstars, and I felt somewhat humbled by that. But we'd been in a year-long sales contest. The reason I was president of the company was I beat them all, those that were distributors. So that sort of leveled the playing field in my mind a little bit, but I never stopped being in awe of their sheer talents. One of the most underrated people on the planet in the sales world was a gentleman from Cedartown, Georgia, named Fred Herman. He made popular KISS, KISS. His version was Keep It Simple Salesperson, or salesman, I think back in
Okay.
those
Yeah.
days.
Back in those
Keep it,
days, right?
yeah, Keep It Simple Salesman. And I stood at the end of the runway with the audience that he recorded that in front of, and I held the boom microphone that he
Wow.
spoke into when he was at that end of the stage. And Fred was just a wonderful, sweet, gentle guy. Never made a killing, but always made a good living.
Right.
Quick Fred Herman story. We're sitting around the table one day. Many of the people you just named sitting around at some seminar somewhere in the dining room. We're swapping stories and all. And somebody brought up, have you ever been cheated by a salesperson? And sweet Fred Herman said, yes. And if I ever see him again, I'll beat him to death with a baseball bat. I mean, he was red in the face, mad.
Right.
So, long story, somewhat shorter, I asked him, what are you talking about? He said he was a mutual fund salesman, came through Cedartown, Georgia in the something 50s, and explained mutual funds to me. And he sort of, and but I said, well, and he said he cost me millions of dollars. Well, I just told you, Fred never had a huge hit. He just made a good living. And I didn't know he had millions of dollars to lose. So a couple of questions later, I discovered what he meant was the mutual fund salesman wasn't good enough to close him. So Fred did not get into mutual funds in the
Wow.
50s. Therefore, that salesman cost him millions of dollars. And
Wow.
Fred was still mad about it. It's a great story, but Fred was
Right.
still mad about it.
And I just got to jump in here. You got to explain to people. I wish I could have met him. I never met him. But your friend, James H. Rucker Jr., you call him Jimmy, you swear up and down that that man probably was the greatest of all time. I hate using that term, but the
Yeah.
master closer that you've seen, and you've written books about closing, and you said this guy just oozed. It was so natural for him to do all these things, but like getting into scripts and all that was a different deal. But the way he could
It
handle,
was a waste of time.
yeah, but the way he could handle people, and I'm not saying manipulate, but just
No,
talk to people and make it seem so natural. Could you explain why you feel like your friend Jimmy was of that caliber? And
well,
have
I can
you
tell
ever
you,
met anybody like that today or similar to that?
when we were doing what was called opportunity meetings back in the day, when Zig and everybody and me, we all got finished with our prospects, we would get in a position because Jimmy would always take the hard ones where somebody raised their hand saying they needed help. So Jimmy would go over and close them. So Jimmy was usually first to close the sale after the meeting was over and last out of the room because the ones nobody else could close kept getting sent to him. And I'm making up a number. I wasn't keeping track at the time, but I'd say roughly 90% of the people that ever sat down with Jimmy Rucker paid what he was asking. Now, he was the best salesperson I ever worked with, but he was not a good sales trainer. He was the unconscious competent, the 4 levels of learning.
Sure.
He'd say, well, just have them watch what I do. And I said,
Oh,
well, yeah, that's not an answer. We need a script. We need something. And he would tend to say the same things every time, maybe in different order, but it was his charm. He had dimples. I didn't know with men that was a turn on or an attraction, but he had cute little dimples. The ladies just loved him. The men didn't feel threatened by him. I think I've told you this story, but this is typical of Jimmy. I grew up with him, so I call him Rucker, his last name.
yeah,
But
right.
typical of Jimmy. Guy says to go. Jimmy goes through the presentation, draws the circles, and blah 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 blah. And therefore, you want to do this, so give me $2,500, which was again adjusted for inflation about 25,000 today. And this is an hour and 10 minutes after they've walked into the room. Write me a check for 25,000. The guy
Right.
said, "Well, I'm in. I'm in." I just didn't bring my checkbook with me. And they're sitting across, those 6-foot folding tables in hotels. And Jimmy said, really? Oh, stood up, reached across the table, opened up the guy's suit jacket where we all used to carry our checkbooks, reached in, got the checkbook, pulled it up. He said, here it is. You didn't forget it. And put it down in front of him. And I was sitting there within 4 or 5 feet of Rucker. And I thought to myself, this is where he gets killed. You just don't reach into somebody's suit jacket, get out their checkbook. And the guy said, oh, I'll be darned, I didn't feel it, and wrote a check for $2,500.
My mercy.
And that was, I only saw him do that once, but that was typical. We were on a fishing trip one day out on a sport fishing boat in Florida, and that we'd rented, chartered for the day, and had 2 or 3 crew members on it. And the captain is up on the flying bridge, and they want you to catch something, because when you get back to the dock and people see the fish you caught, that's how they get their next boatload of people.
Gotcha.
So they really do want you to get something. So Rucker hooked something. I don't know what it was, but it was jumping up in the air and flat, and people are throwing down the hooks on the deck and run around and screaming, and the captain cuts the engine and backs it up and then forward and does all the stuff you do if you're the captain of a sport fishing boat. And just bedlam around me. And I look over at Rucker, and he's sitting there like he's in a Zen trance at a Buddhist temple. And I think he had a cigar in one hand. I really don't recall, but calm. And he sees me out of his peripheral vision looking at him, and he turns around and he says, Ben, it's like selling. The fish doesn't know how this ends, but I do. And that calms me.
Oh,
and
wow.
The fish, sure enough, the fish was up on the back deck pretty quick, and Rucker went back to fishing and drinking beer. But that was, I don't mean to imply that the prospectus of fish or anything, but that was Rucker's thing to selling.
Right.
I know how this comes out, so I don't have to get upset and argue with you in the middle. I just keep pushing towards the goal. In the Closers Part 2 of the 24 books I've written, my favorite, in the back of the book is a chapter called Sales Infiltration.
Yes.
And I hadn't coined the term sales infiltrator until I wrote the chapter, so I didn't know it when I worked with Rucker. But if I had that to do over again, I would dedicate that chapter to Jimmy Rucker. That's what he was. He was a sales infiltrator. He was inside your defensive lines before you even knew he'd started.
Incredible. And since we're talking about this and training and process, Ben, we just witnessed a Super Bowl. A certain number 12 at age 43 went out there and took care of business. Now, here's the thing, and I know you know Ken Walls, and excuse me, Ken, I'm going to use this quote again, but when he and I talked, bunch of us are a member of his Grow Live Academy, and he said, professionals have coaches, Mark, amateurs don't. Now, here's the thing, when you say training the people today, like you get into high tech or AI, whatever it is, they kind of blow you off because they think the technology is going to take care of everything. But a guy like Brady, do you think he trains? Obviously he does.
Yeah.
Like people learning their craft, whether it's sales, whether it's, you're an educator, you name the profession, you're practicing law, you're practicing medicine. You never stop learning. But some people, they just kind of, when you mention sales training, I don't need that. That's okay. Could you explain your thoughts on that? Why people feel that way when they're approached about any type of training? Because sales, you've seen it change. I mean, I'm not telling you anything new as what's going on today, what we're doing right here today.
The sheepdogs that run the herd around have changed. But I'm hearing a little feedback. It's all right. I'll just talk on. The sheepdogs have changed. The technology has changed. It's easier to round up the herd and get them into the pen and so on than it used to be. But the reason they say that, to answer your basic question, is the same reason they say that about learning scripts. They say, I like to wing it. Well, if you've been in selling 30 days, you're already on a script. The question is it a good script or a bad script? Did you drift into it out of laziness and slothfulness? One of the things that the internet and all of our new tools has done that's not good for selling or the people who practice it is it's made you lazy and slothful. An example, I just sent out a reminder today on Constant Contact that we're looking for co-authors to add to the Closer series, as we just discussed moments ago.
Right.
It took me 5 minutes to write the letter originally. I've tweaked it a couple of times. We just sent it out for the 8th or 9th time, I think the log said. And then you hit send and it goes out to thousands of people. And roughly 2% of whoever gets at any given time makes a serious inquiry and they're a hot prospect. And people here have said 2%. Wow, look at all those people. And I go, my closing rate when I'm involved in the process is 86%. So I'm not thrilled about 2%. They're getting distracted by the gross number. Well, if you knew how to sell, 2% would be 86%. Example of the people of the 2% that respond, if I talk to them, they all buy. And the reason is I know what I'm doing. It's a skill. It's not an accidental what we're getting back to is Willy Loman. Most of you people, it's probably too young to know who that is, but Willy Loman in Death of a Salesman.
Right.
And he believed that all you needed to be successful in selling, and therefore he wasn't, was a shoe shine and a handshake. Nowadays, that would be a handshake and clean tennis shoes. But those of us who know what we're doing get far more out of any given situation. And we got that through training. When I joined Holiday Magic, I didn't know anything other than how to be polite. My dad didn't say, and if they say this, you say this, and so and so. He was sort of like Rucker. He had his clientele. When he died, the head of Ultimate Food Company, they used to own the biggest chain in Atlanta. It was called Big Apple grocery chain. When he died, Mr. Altman's, George Altman, the boss of the five brothers, came up to me at the funeral. He said, "Do you mind if I put this in his casket with him?" And I said, "Sure. What is it?" He said, "It's the order pad, our order pad, and I want to put a pen with it." And I said, "Okay, why?" And he said, "Because your father is the last person that we deal with that had the power of the pen."
Wow.
Dad didn't have to go call on him. He did as a courtesy, had lunch with the brothers every Wednesday, but he didn't have to do that. He could sit in his office, get a new line of products, write up the order, send Altman Brothers their copy, and the order was done. It was just like George Altman had signed the order himself.
Wow.
He had the power of the pen. He was a sales infiltrator. And George was telling me that day, it's over. He's the last guy we'll ever trust with that. If Rucker was a food broker with me and my father, if Rucker had called on George Altman, the power of the pen would still exist because Rucker was the same kind of guy. He'd just get inside you, classy guy, lovable guy, no threats, and you're buying before you know it.
Right. That and that's you mentioned a great point about training, and I know you've probably heard all the excuses why not to do something, and I feel like I know you've mentioned this to me, and I'll share it with everybody. You have shoes older than me, Ben. That's true. I'm not even scratching the scratch of the surface, compared to someone like yourself and your caliber. There's so many top level performers, and you can learn from. It just blows my mind when people want to close their eyes, their doors to anything that's going to further enhance their career. Public speaking, sales, education, medical profession. God forbid, I wouldn't want a guy operating on me, that's like had gone by a book and said, "Just a second, I got to call my professor up." And,
Yeah. I quit studying this.
On. I mean,
yeah, I don't study this anymore.
I know. It's just interesting how people look. They want the outcome, but it's like they don't want to put in the work. Like the reason I mentioned Tom Brady, I'll mention him. You can hate him, but the guy does put in the work, and thus there is the outcome. I mean, like you were saying, you get 80%. That's tremendous.
86%.
I'm sorry, 86. I'm sorry. He snapped at me, everybody. I
Here's
thought
a
one.
here's here's a
Oh,
book I wrote for J. Douglas Edwards after he died called Sales Closing Power. What's in this book is what he taught me when I first started in selling. I didn't know anything, and I won a trip, a little Atlanta contest they had. I won it, and the prize was go to Miami, Florida, an American Sales Masters meeting. Hal Kraus used to gather together all the top sales trainers, put them in a room, and sell tickets to come see him, and a private dinner with Doug Edwards. And so I went, sat in the front row, took notes and all. And then when the time came, we went in the dining room, and a couple of things happened that just amazed me. We walked into the grand ballroom of the whatever hotel it was, the Fontainebleau or whatever. And as soon as we hit the door, the room quieted. It's sort of like the reaction that Bobby Jones used to get, the great golfer at East Lake Country Club.
right.
The room quieted and all the heads turned towards, I thought, towards me, which I found fascinating, but actually they were turning to the guy standing next to me, Doug Edwards. And this, somebody said, "It's Doug Edwards." And the room stood up and gave him a standing ovation. And I thought, whoa, that's something. So I was a little hungry, anxious to have dinner, sat down, waiter comes over, and the figure I'm about to give you would be $1,000 today. But he said, "How may I help you?" And Doug Edwards gave him $100 bill and said, "All we're going to need is water. This young man says he wants to be a salesperson, and we're going to achieve that tonight." And till the vacuum cleaner started running, you may know that sound if you stay in a
Yes.
bar or restaurant too long, until the vacuum cleaner stopped running, he talked from the time we walked into the door till then,
Wow.
teaching me, teaching me, teaching me. So that was my first lesson and then I'm working with Zig and Rucker.
Wow.
Rucker, I didn't learn as much as I should have the first year or two because he was my running buddy. We drank beer and tried to pick up girls together. It was hard to take him seriously. But then I noticed all the people, when he started talking, gathering around and taking notes. And I thought, I must be on to something here. I'm with somebody who's on to something.
Right.
So training was it. That and Bill Dempsey telling me if I didn't learn the scripts, don't come back to the meetings. He threw me out of the meetings I had just paid a lot of money to be in, and said, I don't want you here. I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, you don't bring anybody because you haven't learned that script. You can't give the meeting, so you're no help to us in the meeting because you won't learn the script. And you can't close anybody because you haven't learned the closing scripts. And worse, you're here every night and people think you're doing well. You and I know better. So when they get in trouble with the prospect, they raise their hand and you go over, and because you don't know anything, you blow off their prospects. So you're beginning to depress people." I may have told you this, but I remember it was the first time I'd ever heard my name and depressed in the same sentence.
Wow.
Depressed wasn't one of my problems. Being the class clown was one of my problems. And so on. So I got serious because it was either that or lose our total investment and remain broke. So I was forced into sales training, forced into learning scripts, learning my presentation. And it's meant the world. I mean, that's the difference. The people say they don't want to learn scripts and you don't have to learn this and you don't have to learn how to close and operate with people and so on. Those are the people. I've been number one at every sales organization I've ever been with. And those are the people I beat.
Got you. And it's funny you mentioned script because the first thing an actor gets is a script. And
Yeah.
then study it, enhance it, and become the script. I mean, and the script is the guide. But yeah, I agree with you. So
And if you do your scripts well, you become a major movie star. If you
Yeah.
don't do your scripts well, you're that guy in the back of the scene next to the potted plant pretending like he's talking to somebody.
that's a great point. Yeah. So what do you think now moving forward, like in sales? Like here we are today, the way you started out, you've seen it change, you've seen it grow, you've seen it develop. Now people are doing it virtually. That's how they're making calls because of, what's taking place in our world with COVID. Um, what do you think about all that? Like having a call like this, whether it's Zoom, go to meetings, Microsoft Teams, or even doing a virtual hookup like this? Do you think it's a good thing, bad thing?
Well, my span of consciousness started in about 1948 when we moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and the first person I met and became my first friend was a gentleman named Arthur, who had a wooden cart and a mule that pulled it around, and then he unhitched the mule and plowed people's yards. He was born in the hut he still lived in right across the
Right.
street behind the Jarvis Mansion. He was born a slave. And so, and he used to take me up to Civil War soldiers' home, the Confederate soldiers' home, and meet people who, as young boys, they were now old men, had fought at,
Oh,
at
wow.
Bull, at, at Gettysburg and Big Top and all these things you learned about in history. So that's sort of where I start. And now you and I are sitting, 2,500 miles apart or 3,000 miles apart, talking live to each other. That's amazing. If my father walked in here right now and saw this, he would be astounded. It would probably take me from now to next week to convince him the cell phone worked. So I repeat, the sheepdogs have changed. It's
Yes.
easier to do certain things, but selling hasn't changed since the dawn of the first time a caveman had an extra squirrel and decided to sell it to the guy next door in exchange for something. Find out what they need and provide it for them. Because what they're asking is they're about to swap out their dead squirrel for your live rabbit or whatever. What they're asking is, what's in it for me? That's always been the question. The Yankee peddler sold the way I'm selling now. The difference is in his life. I've talked to more people directly and indirectly today in 3 or 4 webinars and stuff
Right.
today than the Yankee peddler would have talked to in his life,
Right.
in his entire life. But when we come face to face, the rules really haven't changed. They want to know what's in it for me, and I want to sell them something that is a quality product or service that's competitively priced, and I don't want to waste any time with them if they're not qualified to buy it, qualified geographically, financially, spiritually, whatever the category. If you're selling Bibles, it'd probably be a good idea to be talking to a Christian.
Right.
So there are many different qualifications, but I want to spend my time offering quality products and services that are competitively priced. Doesn't have to be the cheapest, to qualified people. The only difference is now I can talk to, make up a number, 100,000 people before lunch every day, when in the old days I could talk to 4 or 5.
Right. And I
It's the
have
reason, pardon me one second, it's the
okay.
reason I'm spoiled is to group sales. Understand all those people Rucker and I brought into the meeting, most of the work was done up front by the film that we showed to everybody and by the scripted presentation we gave to everybody. And so when a client brings me in and says, blah, 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 the first thing that goes through my mind, is there any way to make this a group presentation? It's so much easier to sell to 5,000 people with one sales presentation, one offering, than
Sure.
it is to make 5,000 offerings. So I like group sales selling was the forerunner to the internet. Get 5,000 people in the grand ballroom of some hotel and do a good job of explaining it, and then have your minions go out and sit down, clean up the fine points, and get the money.
Right. So the point being that you're making, and I understand this, you were really doing this to a group back in the day. This right now, this tool is just enhancing us to be able to
Yeah.
do that. I understand, exactly. So what you're saying in essence, the game hasn't changed so much. Maybe the
No.
technology, couple techniques here or there, strategies, whatever, but pretty much it's the same thing. It's like I'll go back to football. He who tackles and blocks best.
Blockle.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. It's been a long day, Ben. But anyway, the team that can do that, that blocks and tackles and has the fundamentals down, 9 times out of 10, they're going to win.
Lombardi used to start every session, and I knew people who played for him at Green Bay, and I had the entire Washington football team after he went over to Washington
Yes.
in my encounter seminar in the middle of the night. The entire team asked if they could come in because they heard us in the meeting. It was an encounter seminar, like Scared Straight in Reverse.
Mhm.
And they said, you sound just like Coach Lombardi, who had just died. And they said, do you mind if we come in? We'll be quiet. Well, the first two that knocked on the door filled up the door frame. They were so big. I said, no, you can come in. You want my car? But I got them we took a 4 or 5 hour break from what we were normally doing. I had them talk to the audience about Vince Lombardi, who said winning isn't everything, it's the only thing, or vice versa, whatever. And I could argue with that a little bit. There are more important things, but winning is nice. But they said that the legend was true. Lombardi started every football season, walked to the front of the room, held up a football, and said, gentlemen, this is a football. The basics.
Right.
Blocking, tackling, leaving, nothing to chance. There was nothing new. Your job is to take this ball and advance it to the other end of the field and cross the goal line. How can you do that efficiently? Funny we should be talking about that. I'm not a great football fan. I mean, I just don't spend a lot of time watching it or any other sports, but I do watch the 7th game of the World Series. Yeah. Whoever's playing, I watch the 7th, if there is the last game that the odd makers say is going to be the last game. I watch the last quarter of the football, Super Bowl, things like that. I want to know who won, how well did they do. I watched a little bit more of the football this time than I normally would because of Brady. I wanted to see something done for the old guys.
Right.
And if you watched him, he reminded me very much of Rucker. Every time they cut to him, there was no, let's go get him. Yeah. It looked like he was at the office typing a document. Calm, cool, looking downfield. He lines them up when the opposing team comes out of the huddle. He's looking to see who's going where, because it's going to change the play when he gets to the line. They said nobody can pick apart. Well, you don't do that panicked and excited and leaping up and down. You do that with cold, calculating skill. He's got it. Rucker had it. And all of the people listening tonight can have it. They can duplicate it. It's just a matter of a learned skill.
Right. I'm going to stop you here because a lot of people have popped on again. He says, I believe Ben is one of the best ever. Get his books. That's from Tom Ginn.
Thank you, Tom.
And I have 2 of them. I need to get 3. And then when you crank up 4, 5, and 6, keep adding to the collection. This is an interesting, Ernest, I appreciate you sharing this. He says, I can remember 20 years ago when teleconferencing was costing our company, and you can remember this, Ben, $2,000 an hour. Now with the growth of technology and the increased market share, it has gotten down to $50 a month. I still do groups of 100 to 300 attendees, but no longer have to rent a $5,000 hotel conference room. How about that?
Absolutely. Live meetings, if you discount the cost of getting there and the aggravation of getting everybody there and so on, are always best. People like to shake hands, look in the eye, get to know you and so on. But I'm willing to give up that edge to reach more people faster. Ernest, when I started the 800 call center industry in 1976, first one in the world, our phone, a 800 number, we used to call them a Watts number. An 800 number costs $10,000 a month up front and at the end of the month, they billed you for your overtime on that one line. The reason I was able to start the call center industry was basically I time shared it. Everybody used the same phone number. I still have it, 800-824-7888. 50 to 60,000 people called it a day. And if they didn't give it immediately, we then said, what's the operator number in the ad you're looking at? Operator, 780. Right. They then flipped to the big catalog in front of them. We didn't have computers on every desk in the beginning, to page 780 and read the script. This is operator 780. Xerox has asked us to get, or with Xerox or whatever, has asked you to get the following information and so on. In those days, Ernest, empathizing with you, I never saw a phone bill for a month after the first few months of getting rolling, less than $56,000 for our phone lines. That wasn't rent. That wasn't who answered the phone or anything. And now I don't even know what an 800 number costs. I've never seen it broken out on our phone bill. I think it's $5 or something if you can get one that you want. So you're right. It's absolutely made so many other things possible. But when you get them on the phone or get them on the teleconference, you still got to know how to sell.
Yeah.
People said, do you believe in scripting? 50 to 60,000 calls a day, and every one was answered by a script. After they'd been with us a while, you couldn't tell they were reading, but they turned to the proper page and read what it said. No improvising, no winging it, no, you're not in the mood. You read the script, or you used to work for the National Communication Center. We'd walk you to the door.
And Ben, this is what's neat about Ernest. He said, I'm looking forward, and I'm going to share in the next one, getting back to face-to-face meetings as soon as the masks disappear.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a true point. And then he says here, I used to have 800 numbers. They were awesome. So,
you still should have them.
Yeah.
The website and or text or whatever is the new 800 number, but right. You should still have an 800 number.
Right.
And someday that'll end. I still have a PO box, for instance.
Right.
No, once you make contact with a customer, you don't change the way that contact works. I repeat, 800-824-7888. If you dial it today, please don't. But if you do, it'll ring right here on this cell phone. Call forwarded to this phone. And I've had that since 1976. So what is that? 24, 34, 44 years.
Wow.
And Gigi from time to time says, shouldn't we dump that number? I said, no, we still get 5 or 6 calls a day, usually for clients, some of the 1,500 clients we have. But we use that number to advertise the Closers book. We sold the first 2 million Closers Part 1 books on that 800 number. So there's 2 million books out floating around, plus or minus a house fire or two, right, that have that 800 number in it. Why would I get rid of it?
And Ben, has it been over 3 mil, like your books, like the Closer series? Have you sold over 3 mil or?
The Closers part, what we call Part 1, it wasn't called Part 1 in the beginning, just like World War I wasn't called right. World War I until World War II came along. We sold 10.5 million copies of that book when we quit counting 25 years ago.
Wow.
Now we don't sell in the volume we used to. I had a big distributor organization out knocking on doors and so on. I don't want the hassle of doing that anymore. But we still sell. It would still be a bestseller if we measured it that way today, but not in the volume we used to do it in.
And Ernst was agreeing with you. He says, I've been in telco for almost 40 years. I know what you're talking about, Ben. And we're saying about the 800 number and should have it. And he's a wise gentleman here, Ernest. So
there's so few of us left, Ernest. Don't give up.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Ernest. I really appreciate it. This was like a great teaching moment of what you're talking to us about. I mean, I feel like I'm getting some sales training right here, man. This is awesome. I mean, I can't put a price tag on this. I don't even want to go down the road. I'm afraid when we end, you're going to like send me an invoice, Ben, and say, hey, Mark.
Well, Ernest and I met before the meeting. He's going to send you the invoice, then we're
Oh,
going to split it.
oh, is that how it's going to work? Oh, okay. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. And then he says here, I still use the same script I used for the past 24 years, as long as I don't deviate from the script. And that is so true.
Much of Ernest, much of what I've said to Mark tonight, when he asked me a specific question or I thought of a specific thing, everything I've said is scripted. The Jimmy Rucker fishing story is scripted. It happened, but I figured out an effective way to tell it where they laugh. Jimmy Rucker reaching over and pulling out the checkbook out of the guy's pocket. That's not the first time I've told that story. And I tell, if you took this and the last 50 times I told it and played them together, it would sound like the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Once you figured out an effective way to say something, why would you say it any other way? Most of you have gotten over the years a letter from the Wall Street Journal, and I'm paraphrasing. In fact, if I said it exactly, I'd probably get sued because it's trademarked, it's copyrighted, etc. I forget the length of time, 2 years ago, I think. 2 years ago on a spring day, two people graduated from college, from the same college, same class. One is now the CEO of the company, and the other one, same company, is stuck in middle management. And they go on to imply that the only difference anybody could figure out between the two is one read the Wall Street Journal every day, the CEO, and the other one didn't. They've been trying to, that's called now their control piece. We know what this does every time we mail it. That's our control piece. They've been trying to beat it. They want a better letter at some point. For over 40 years, they've been trying to beat that letter, and they never have, not once. Why, therefore, except for testing purposes, would you mail out some letter that was different from a letter that's virtually foolproof? Why would I tell you, if I describe the closers part 1 to you versus the closers part 2, I would say closers part 1 is the red raw meat of selling, the kicks, the blocks, and the punches. Selling the way it really is, not the way we wish it was. The closers part 2 picks up where that leaves off and shows you what sophisticated people really do with that information. I've said it that way verbatim for 35 or 40 years since, well, not that long, because Closers Part 2 has only been out 25 years. Ever since Closers Part 2 came out and I started working with it, I've scripted it, and that's the way you do it. And if you work for me, that's the way you do it. And if you don't, like at the National Communication Center, we show you where the door is.
I love how you give that stern look and you just say, oh, you're not reading the script. Excuse me, Mr. Jones, there's the door.
Yeah, people say, I can't motivate my people to do scripts. And I said, well, let me make a suggestion to you. It's not motivating them. It's a job requirement. It's not a suggestion. It's a job requirement. And when we come up with a better script, we will all tested, probably written by me, tested. We will all change to the new script on the same day at the same hour. In the meantime, you will say the script exactly as written.
Right.
Now, you can do it out of order. My old friend Hal Holbrook just died a couple of days ago. He did Mark Twain.
Right.
He had 9.5 hours of material, Mark Twain material, memorized word for word. But he says he never gave the same presentation twice, about a 2-hour presentation with a half-hour break in the middle. And the reason was, based on the audience and the reaction he got to story 22, he might tell story 41 next, or 39, or 11, or whatever. But when he decided on a story, verbatim, word for word, every time.
And based on what you just said, I have to share this because Tom Ginn's a coach. He said most people find the door on their own by not coaching and wonder why the door hit them in the butt. I mean,
absolutely.
Oh, that's incredible. And then you got some other comments. This is a good thing, and even better that it does have the proper impact with me. 5 years ago, Robert's a deep thought here. I would
Mhm.
not have known who Gary Halbert is. Yeah,
Great
Ernest
guy.
brought that up.
What was the great guy?
Right, and
And his son is what's his name? Starts with a B, I think. His son is doing a wonderful job now, but it's like being Frank Sinatra Jr. It's really difficult to top a master like Gary. I
right.
talked to him several times, and all he ever wanted to know was, instead of "Hi, how you doing? Who's making the most money?" and so on. All he ever wanted to know was, because I was good friends with Joe Sugarman and Joe Carbo, Lazy Man's Way to Riches, the greatest book selling story in the history of mankind. We were buddies and had done seminars together and so on. All he wanted, yeah, Bond held. Thank you. What he wanted to
Albert,
know
yeah, there it is.
was, what were they like? What did they teach you? How do you know? What did you do this? He was still, to the day he died, trying to learn.
That's incredible. Hey, man, you and Ernest ought to hook up. He says Bond and I chat occasionally.
I
So
would
that's cool.
love to do that. I don't think I've ever talked to Bond, but I get stuff from them all the time, and I'm very impressed with what he does.
So I got to ask you this one. If your buddy was alive today, Jimmy, what would he think about what you're doing? I mean, you've written a book about him. Has he ever, he's never seen that you've had it published, the book on closing. And now
Well, I hope Jimmy somehow watches this, because he will be astounded to know that he's dead. He was
he's
alive this
probably up there
morning.
figuring out,
No,
I'm not really
no,
dead, am I? I'm going back.
he was in the Atlanta area sending me emails this morning. So the reason I probably talk about him as if he's gone is he retired with a capital R. I mean,
Yes.
retired, no thank you, nothing you can tell me will ever bring me back. I moved him and his wife and two kids to California to work
Oh,
for
wow.
me in the early days of the National Communications Center. And then he's a Southern boy. He wanted to go back home. So
Right.
he did. And shortly after that, he retired. And I mean, I've had situations where somebody like you would want to have him on to talk and so on. And
He doesn't want to do
I
it.
would say, Jimmy, no. One was on getting past the gatekeeper or something, which he was a
Right.
master at. And I said, called him. I said, listen, all they want to do, you sit in your house. You don't have to get dressed up. Just talk to the guy. He said, Ben, let me spell retired for you. I'll do it slowly. R-E. So he's done.
Right.
From a go to work, talk to anybody about it status. He's done. He hit the last grand slam home run, went into the locker room and disappeared.
Right. Wow, that's incredible. So Ben, when do you think that next book's going to come out? I'm just asking because I know you've got some people out there behind the scenes, and what's your take on that? What do you think?
Uh, I've read a few of the chapters. He doesn't want to release the part he's writing all at once to me.
Sure,
He said, I don't want to get blasted with criticism and then ruin
sure.
my creative thing and so whatever. But he sent me, I think, two or three of the chapters, and it is very good. And he's way ahead of that. So I think probably part four will be out. I'm guessing, don't hold me to this, will probably be out in 4 or 5 months,
Oh wow,
and we're working with some top-notch publishing people. It'll break it. It'll be a Amazon bestseller, which always amuses me. Bestseller doesn't mean what it used to mean at the New York Times or whatever, but in
right,
its category for a few days, it'll break at number one. And what I've seen is very good. And both of the people who are currently actively writing theirs,
hmm,
are top-notch pros in their industry. And there's a great example. I'm a good generalist. Bring me in, spend a day teaching me, where's the key go, what's the steering wheel, and I can
right,
sell cars. But these people go deep in their industries, home improvement, solar, etc. And I could never write what they're doing. I reserve the right to edit it, so nobody embarrasses us. I'm a good writer, good editor, and so on. So I will edit all of them, co-write a few little things, do the forward, and put the National Association of Professional Salespeople's seal of approval on it, or it won't go to the printer.
Oh, wow.
But it's coming, and I think you're going to really like it. I'm excited about it, and I've written between writing and ghostwriting 24 books. We think.
I was going to ask you, how many books have you been involved with, Ben? Just off the top of your head?
Well, if you count forwards and editing, hundreds. But I have written, where I can say I wrote that 24, 12 under my name, and 12 that I can't tell you what they are because they were ghost written. There's a guy who ghost wrote one of Trump's books who talks about how he ghost wrote it. And I think you ought to be taken out and shot. He paid you a lot of money to ghost write a book. Shut up. I did get caught once. They don't know I was caught, but a guy called me up one time, or maybe we were talking about something else. But anyway, he said, "Did you write fill in the blank?" And I said, if I did, I wouldn't admit it. And I answered fast. So that didn't mean that I had written it. It just meant, and don't ask me 5 other titles. I won't tell you. But it turned out he caught me. Some of the little slang I use. I'll say stuff when I don't want to list 15 things, and so on. And I guess I used stuff one too many times. And he said, "All right, I know that you didn't say you wrote it, but I think you did." But that's once out of 24, once out of 12. That's not too bad.
When that new book does come out, your wife Gigi's going to have some orders, I'm sure, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure she will.
So once again, you're going to get aced out of the deal. And
I've learned to pick my battles, Mark.
Hey, I get it.
That's
my
not
wife
one of them.
Gina is Greek, so I totally understand, and I keep my head down, and
as you may have noted, Ronzoni is an Italian name.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And
yes.
From time to time, I see flashes of the Italian, and that's all I want to see is brief flashes.
Yes. The intensity level can tend to get up there, but I wanted to share it. Robert likes writing novels here. He says, learning how to write to have the best reach still remains to be learned. It was realized that my multi-syllabic complex sentences. Syllabic, sorry. I'm trying to read this. What a close told me, Robert, you are many things, but a Mormon isn't one of them. Oh my goodness. That's
moron.
I'm sorry. Did he say moron? Okay.
Sorry. It did say, you said Mormon.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Moron. Wow. Well, Robert, you're not a moron. I mean,
Robert, when I was learning how to write for the first time, I was a senior in high school, and I got the toughest teacher on the planet. Ms. Edith Griffin was her name.
Oh,
and I walked into her classroom. I'd been thrown out of public school, went to private school, got thrown out of private school. Public school had to take me back for the last year and a half.
Ben, you were a hellion.
Well, I was funny. I was a cut up. So anyway, I walk into her room late. I hadn't been in that building a year and a half, and I wasn't a senior when I was there. So I arrived late and came skidding in like that guy on Seinfeld that lives across the hall and slides into the room. Kramer, I think is his name. But anyway, I came sliding in the classroom, and the class cracked up because they assumed I came late to be funny, which was what I was known for. And she looked up from her desk and she said, "Mr. Gay, I presume." We'd never met. She was there when I was there the first couple of years, but I went out of my way not to meet her. And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry I'm late." And she got up, took a chair, one of those built-in chair desk things, pulled it up next to her desk, faced it out towards the class. And she said, "You will sit here today. This year, you will sit here," where she reach out and touch me. And I said, "Okay." And she said, and I have two things you're going to achieve this year. I know all about you. You're going to win the state writing championship, and you're going to speak at graduation. I thought she'd flipped out. I thought, oh, the poor old thing, she just doesn't, she can't think anymore. I could barely write my name versus write the state championship, and I thought valedictorian and salutatorian spoke at graduation. There was no chance of being number one or two, no chance out of 350 people or something. So I nodded politely and sat down and thought, well, this is going to be an interesting year since neither of those are going to happen. And I'll tell you that she taught me two things. I said all that to say this, a writing question that sort of set me off. She asked me to write something, and I started writing. She says, no, go to the back page. So I flipped to the back page, which was blank. She said, write the last sentence that you're going to write in this assignment. Write the last sentence right there. I said, well, I haven't started. Write the last sentence. So I sort of figured out where I was going to go with it, and I wrote the last sentence. She said, we can do better in the future, but that's fine. That's your North Star. You now know every word you put on the paper, you're aiming to get in position for that, to reach the North Star and have that make sense.
Oh,
That's
wow.
the way she taught me how to sell. Therefore, it took me a while to figure it out, but
yes,
I now know the reason I have an 86% closing rate is I don't scatter shoot. I'm like a sniper in a tree. I know why I'm there. I know what I'm doing. And by the time I ask you to buy, I already know the answer, or I wouldn't have asked you to buy.
right.
She taught me that North Star first sentence thing. And then the other one was a little more humorous, but it was also true when he said monosyllabic, etc. I started to write, and I don't know what I wrote. It was something to impress her, and she crossed it out. And she said, now, I want you to write. To be successful in writing, you must write at a sixth grade level where a sixth grader could understand it. And I looked at her and sort of nodded. He said, fortunately for you, that should come naturally. So
wow.
Looking back, I figured out that was an insult. But anyway, I write short sentences. A guy emailed me not too long ago because he saw some response. He said, you're a man of few words. And I emailed back, true. So if you can say it in 10 words instead of 50, say it in 10. And now break it up. A guy, who is it? Michael Senoff, Hard to Find Seminars.
Okay.
He writes almost daily with some offer. And every paragraph, it's carried to an extreme, I think, but every paragraph, every sentence is a separate paragraph. He said, I figured out how these people read. You give them, this much text, their mind goes numb because they're used to seeing yes, no, FYI, stuff like that. And so I was already writing to a sixth grade level. I've now shortened even that up. Keep it simple, 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 which is among the things Dr. Hill taught me. He said, your job is to take any situation, any problem, and reduce it to its lowest common denominator, which is simple. Simplicity must be your key operating word. That was like Miss Griffin. For me, simple is easy. It's all I understand anyway.
And since you brought up Dr. Hill, Napoleon Hill, when you met him, he was an older man. How old were you at the time?
I was 25. He was 84 the day he was given to me. He was old enough biologically to be my great grandfather. If they had a kid at 18 and blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
Old enough biologically to be my great grandfather. And he was given to me by William Penpatrick as a gift, and told to be my friend, basically. Sit in the office, be my friend, and give advice whenever he thought it was appropriate. And at the end of the first year, I said to Bill, William Penpatrick, I said, Bill, he's mentioning that our first year is up. Are you going to go ahead? And he said, well, you're going to go ahead. First year on me was $50,000. saying this is 1967. He said, first year was $50,000. You guys work it out, but I suspect this can be at least 50,000 for you. I don't think I'd have gotten fired if I hadn't hired him, but the implication was
Right.
Napoleon Hill has been very good for you. So I paid him that year. And I forget if I paid him the third year or not, probably did. But he died in the third year. He died in 1970. So, and his thing, Mark, you'll get a kick out of this. He was up at the house many times. That's where he stayed when he was in town. But I poured him some apricot brandy. It came in what looked like cut crystal bottles. I don't know if they were molded or not, but apricot brandy. And he said, every year from now on, added to my fee is to be a case of apricot brandy. Well, it was a sipping thing. So when he died, I suspect the better part of 3 cases were still there. And his family probably thought he was a closet drinker. But the first of every year, I sent him the first. I learned it a couple of months later. Sent him one. Next year, sent him one. Third year, sent him one.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And Tom wants to know, like I did. He took my question, but what's the one thing that Napoleon Hill taught you, Ben? I mean, one
There
profound.
were hundreds of things, but I was asked that in a seminar not too long ago, and not having a ready answer, I just shut my eyes and said, it's like Satchel Paige or whoever it was, feet don't fail me now, tongue don't fail me now, and it just came out naturally. He taught me integrity in all things. And I'm forever saying, integrity is when you do what you ought to do when no one's watching or something. Right. I said, no, especially when no one's watching. It's easy to behave when you're being watched, however temporary it may be. But integrity in all things. And then, probably tailored to me and his observations of watching me work, because he sat at the end of my desk. It was a conference table, but that's where his chair was to my left. Right. He watched me work long enough to know that the next lesson was focus. To this day, I'm easily distracted, but every time I start to get distracted in the middle of doing something, I think of Dr. Hill. Focus, really? Ben. Yep. Focus, Ben. Focus. So I focus back in. And the third one was action. Take action. He caught me. I tell the story, and I won't do the whole story with you, but he caught me. He was in most of them, holding a series of meetings about a new product line. And I picked the name of the line off the back of a yacht. That's where I always got product names. People get very creative when they're naming boats. So I'd go steal the names. It was a men's line. We call it High Tides. We decided on that. We decided on the artwork, not final, but it was just a matter of like bringing something into focus. The product line was designed by Mort Scott, my evil genius chemist. He also created Sally Hansen Hard as Nails and Bromo Seltzer. So you, your wife or your husband have all used some of Mort Scott's products, and he designed our whole line. So we had a meeting and everybody left, and I said, we'll meet next Wednesday. And when the door shut, all Dr. Hill's advice to me was door shut. He never said boo to me other than social things with anyone else present. And so the door shut, and I got where I'd hear the click and then turn to him like, is there something I should know since the door's shut now? And he said, Ben, what are you going to know at the next meeting that you don't know now? And I said, well, nothing, I guess. He said, you're dithering. Take action. So I called Marty, my secretary. She sat right outside the door, and I said, Marty, bring them back. So she regathered it was mainly the board of directors, but each with their specialty, gathered them back up. And I said, is there anybody here that needs to know anything before they do their part of this project? No? Been ready to go for weeks. I said, okay, wow. It's high tides. Let's go. Bill Brogan, order the stuff. Mort, start mixing the vat, so and so. But Dr. Hill had caught me dithering.
Right.
So integrity in all things, focus and action led me to that story.
And you have to share this story, and some of them haven't heard this, but you mentioned the word integrity. Tell us about the time Bobby Jones was playing golf. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did he not inadvertently, did he step on a ball? I forget, but you know the story how that
Yeah,
played.
he was probably going to win the tournament because Bobby Jones won the tournaments, But he wrote down his scorecard and turned it in, and somebody said, "No, sir, I'm making up numbers, but
Mhm.
on the fifth hole, you had a four, not a five." And Jones, this is before television cameras over your
Sure.
shoulder and drones and everything, had gone down in the rough with his club to find the ball. His caddy wasn't right with him, probably nearby, but was not right on him when he found the ball. And he said he either grounded his club, which is not allowed, or touch the ball.
Ball, right.
He said, I did that, so that's the reason it's a five, not a four. And of course, the question comes up, nobody knew but you. And he said, well, that's the reason it's a five, not a four. I knew. So he cost himself that tournament by writing down a score that no one on the golf course knew was the right score.
You know, there's something to be said from learning from people like that. That's and you knew him at the twilight of his career. I mean, I understand he was in crutches and he couldn't play golf or whatever, and he was a lawyer at the time. But you always share that story. I could just see people when he walked in at East Lake, and there'd like be a hush, and here he comes.
Yeah, and downtown at the Atlanta Athletic Club, which was
Athletic
part
club,
of East Lake.
right?
But where any room he walked in, the crowd would get quiet, and then you'd start hearing the whispering. That's Bobby Jones.
Yeah,
And then they would stand and give him a standing ovation just for showing up, not unlike Doug Edwards that day in Miami. But it was a lot more respectful than that. And I think I told you, Bobby went to, I shouldn't say Bobby, Mr. Jones
Jones. Yeah.
went to the management of the club or the club president or somebody and said, I've been coming here my whole life. He was born on what became the first 18. His house sat on what later became the first 18 of East Lake. So
Oh
he was
wow.
literally born on a golf course. Hadn't been finished yet, but built on born on a golf course. So he said, I don't want to pull rank or anything, but this is embarrassing, and I'm not coming back here anymore unless you stop that. Well, they're thinking Bobby Jones isn't coming to East Lake. And it's like God isn't going to go to paradise anymore or whatever. And so the word went out, no more clapping, just ignore him when he comes into the room. I remember it being discussed at our dinner table. I guess they sent out something to the members or phone people or whatever, because Dad was saying to Mom, Fran, if Mr. Jones walks in the room, we're not to stand and cheer anymore. And she said, fine. And I made a mental note. And then the next time he walked in, I wasn't in the room when it happened, but I heard about it. The next time he walked in, the room quieted. And then instead of 2 seconds before the cheering started, it went to like 5 seconds. And then
Oh,
they stood
well,
and cheered. And they said Bobby just put his head down and shook
Chip
it
is
and sat down, had dinner. There was no way to stop the respect they had for him.
well, Ben, we're kind of getting to the end of this, but I did want to ask you one thing. What would you tell someone that's starting out? It doesn't have to be sales. It could be any profession. What advice would you give them today with the way one can learn now, virtually, face to face? What would you say to somebody today?
For me, when I'm asked questions like that, what would you say to the younger Ben Gay? I would say, which sounds sort of funny because I was making a lot of money when I was 23
Right.
and owned my own business when I was 14, a lawn mowing business with 25 kids in the growing season, which in Atlanta is quite long. Uh, so
Indeed.
Yeah, but it's still the same because I know I wasn't taking things seriously in business until Bill Dempsey told me not to come back to the meetings anymore because I was depressing people. That's when I got serious. So that's 23-ish, I'm guessing. 1966, I'm guessing, about that era. And I would have said to that younger Ben Gay, get serious sooner. If we're talking about business, get
Right.
serious sooner. And because I could have moved along even faster, and the starting point is necessary. I could have done much more. I've told you, Mark, with all the modern things that we have today, if I'd had all these devices and things and could reach 100,000 people with hitting send instead of driving to 50,000 homes to
Right.
pick up 100,000 people, I would now be the benevolent dictator of the world. I would have made enough money I get mad every time I see Amway or see on television Amway Stadium and so on. That's Rich and Jay. We were bigger than Amway. We were bigger than Amway and Shackley combined, but
Wow.
we didn't have the technology. They didn't either, and I wasn't serious. I was, as president of the company, I still spent a little too much time goofing around, having a good time. So I would
Got
get serious sooner would be a big, big part of it.
I appreciate you sharing that, Ben. Well, guys, here we are. It's 8:30, and I know you got things to do. I got things to do, but I really enjoyed having you with us
That's
this evening.
that's to Ernest. He said Bill Dempsey was quite the closer, wasn't he? He was
Yes.
almost as good as Rucker.
Thank you, Bill.
Uh, yeah, thank you,
Ernest,
Bill.
yeah, Bill's the man, but thank you, Ernest, for sharing that.
Yeah,
And
I'm
here we
sorry to
go.
interrupt.
Hey, Mark, tell him what my card says. My title is. What was that? If I remember, yeah, he has a card. Is it Sheep Herder, Ron? Is that what it's called? Or if I'm wrong, tell me. I've seen all sorts of sales cards from, you know, and then here we've got another one. I have experienced the feeling thanks to one of my meds. Oh God, Robert, you're killing me. I was impacted by two of the major side effects: delusions of grandeur and excessive confidence. Robert,
I've
you're
had
too much.
that. That's an advantage, but it can be a disadvantage. I've suffered from it also. My card says when you, why isn't, oh, there it is. I was down
There
in
it is.
front of the
Yep.
screen. First line, salesman. It goes on to talk about trainer and coach and consultant and so on. But first, what I am is a salesman, and I am very proud of it.
They said thank you for the night, Ben. You're sharing your wisdom. And Ben, I'm sorry, I was wrong. There was another graphics guy, Ron, that his title was sheep herder, but Ron's is benevolent dictator. Yeah, so he has his
Super.
own business. I love these titles, and Robert says thank you as well. And Ben, we can't thank you enough because every time you come on, I learn something new. And I guess it's something my dad lived to be 95. As much as things claim to change, they kind of stay the same. The fundamentals, it never goes away. And you just reemphasize that for me, and I appreciate you doing that. Sometimes we
Truman,
all question ourselves, but
President Truman said the only thing new in the whole world is the history you don't know.
right. So true. Well, listen, I'm going to close this out. Don't go anywhere. And I'm just going to take about 2 minutes and close it out. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Ernest, thank you for sharing your stories. He's saying, yes, thank you. Tremendous. And Robert, as always, I tip my hat. Tom, I mean, I can't name everybody out here. Ron, I mean, I could go on and on and on. But guys, thank you so much for taking time. Ben, I'm going to put you in the not isolation, back in the green room, and you can have some of that beverage back there that you and. But I'll be right back, so don't go anywhere.
All right, Mark.
You got it. Thank you, Ben. Hey, thanks everybody. as always, it's an educational experience, and it's nice to have a living legend. I think about things. We're all going to leave the face of the earth, and the footprint that Ben's has left us, and the legacy, and it still continues. The guy's still out there doing his thing, and that's why I always use that quote from Miles Davis about a legend is an old man with a cane. Ben doesn't have a cane, but they sit around and talk about what they used to do, and he is just out there doing it. Oh my God, it's the legend himself. Jay Jensen, Jay. Oh my God. Now there's a crazy man. And Jay can appreciate Ben because he and I have talked. Thank you. And Jay, we need to get you back too. He's done some very unique things on LinkedIn and the art of selling. And that's the whole thing. What I've learned tonight, fundamentals, fundamentals, fundamentals. And there you go, Ben. I'll share that. Jay Jensen, and Ben is a legend. Yes, sir, indeed. And that's what it's all about. Scripts, fundamentals, and Jay puts it into a comedy routine about dealing with a customer, and it's not your CRM. But anyway, thank you everybody for being here and sharing it. This was Mark Gassert. Mark's message, the peachiest place on the planet. You better believe it. And we had one of our own native sons here return from the West Coast, or as I kiddingly say, the left coast, East Lake. And Ben Gay, we really appreciate you being here. And with that, everybody, don't forget, it's all about being a friend, be a leader, and most important of all, be of service. And I will catch everyone tomorrow. Thank you so much, everybody, for taking time and sharing this to your friends. Good evening.